It definitely doesn't feel like it's closing quickly on 6 years since the initial release of the Nintendo Switch, and promptly the subject of today's video, the fantastic Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild blew everyone's expectations out of the water when it first released, and subsequently the sequel remains as probably the most hyped game in the last several years, as it will continue to do so until its dramatic release. Today I wanted to cover the gameplay and story of Breath of the Wild, and how its confounding impact on the open world genre still allows the game to be an absolute treasure even today. When translating an entire franchise to a formula once so distant from the roots of that franchise's inception, Nintendo had to procure a combat system and a system of wonder that has been relished in every Zelda game since the original in terms of creating a proactive exploration system. The combat of Breath of the Wild remains to me as some of the most creative for an open world. Much of this doesn't exactly come from a sort of complexity in terms of a skill tree or certain sets, but rather it's the open world that exacts the game in its prosperity of greatness. The combat in this game is absolutely wonderful. At first you'll see yourself quite disappointed by certain mechanics such as weapons breaking and less tools than previous games, but then you become acquainted with the variety of the weapons and armor. There are so many sets, all with such unique bonuses and additions that make them all viable options at every stage of the game, or specific ones that pertain to certain areas or situations. As well as this, the amount of weapons is exponential. Being able to find a weapon anywhere, all with different abilities and systematic utilizations, makes the combat so incredible. Often throughout the game, the mixing up required by breakable weapons actually conjures a system much more creative than the predecessors, and this is only possible through the advent of once unattained freedom in all aspects. I think what really adds to these factors is the utilization of the runes within the game. At a surface level, they should only be used when needing them for certain situations, but when you mix and match them through the use of untapped creativity, you can create some spectacular scenarios. Using bombs or the magnet allows for players to think of all the different ways they'd fight, and this creates a system so diverse and different from the norm that it becomes so unexpected. What of course helps this is the large enemy variety, where the combat doesn't become stale because each enemy requires their own way of being defeated, and so the player isn't stuck pertaining to one certain mode, rather continuously evolving and innovating the use of their tools around the world of the game. Speaking upon the world of the game, the exploration here still remains unmatched in the genre even to this day. One of the reasons this game took off in a way no other game in this franchise had done is due to the fact that the exploration here was one full of bliss. It combined a wondrous, untamed open world with the utter freedom to allow the player's agency to control the very actions of the world in turn. The fact that you can climb anything, anywhere, walk upon any landscape may seem a bit more common nowadays, but it's the obvious relishment of the inspiration games obtained from the flawless exploration of Breath of the Wild that led to continuous innovation in the open world space. Breath of the Wild foremostly redefined what exploration in an open world meant, no longer constrained to specific areas with the underlying of a so-called open world, rather a game that allowed the player to gaze from upon a mountain, point to any random location within that map, and somehow be able to travel there. It's why games continuously improve upon their exploration aspect, because Breath of the Wild was so incredibly fluent with its language of exploration that other companies struggled to speak a language in the same manner Breath of the Wild did 6 years ago. I guess this may serve to some as a continuation of the latest rant of exploration, but the open world itself is what brings everything in this game to its absolute conundrum of perfection in so many ways. The open world complements the combat in its untapped freedom, but it's also beautiful and endless for the exploration of the game to also take its center stage. Even today, thinking about the immersiveness and beauty of such open worlds like Breath of the Wild only contains for me a small gallery of games. Games like Elden Ring and Red Dead Redemption 2 are the only giants that can still match the unprecedented beauty of the world of Breath of the Wild. The first time I went upon that mountaintop at the very start of the game, where ensued such beautifully composed music, gazing Link upon a world so destroyed and different from the one he inherited 100 years ago, so untamed that the player was to be its tamer. The vistas, landscapes, and beauty of this world will always amaze me, and it's amazing despite the obvious underpowered hardware within the Nintendo Switch that it's very first game has still to this day remained its most beautiful. That may seem like a knack to the various developers who've released beauty on this hardware, but rather it is a testament to the technical wizardry of the teams behind Breath of the Wild, and how despite the conditions of the hardware they had to utilize, they were able to create an open world that rivals the very best of games in its wow factor. Exploring everything within such an endless open world may take many hours, and I don't personally think I've touched past the pure surface level of it all, but the game is one so incredible in how it displays everything, and exploring it has been a wonder like no other. Being able to go anywhere, look anywhere, and get so distracted by just the enamored nature of the world is something very few games in this industry do, but yet Breath of the Wild always conjures to amaze. Sometimes looking at clips even today, seeing locations I've never seen before in their beauty builds a monument to the greatness of the world created by Nintendo in this wonderful game. Yet despite its open world wizardry, Nintendo's attempts at a much more cohesive story while still pertaining to the newly acquired freedom of the world was much less than stellar for many people out there. I'd argue that a precedent set by previous Zelda games has bewildered the franchise as one with such an amazing story. I think this can be seen by the continuously evolving theories created by fans on games such as Ocarina of Time, where the story, despite being cohesive, is still full of an amazing mystery and all of the plot points addressed. But Breath of the Wild kind of stumbles in creating that same wonder in its story. Much of this is due to the fact that when you're trying to create a game so open that it blows out any other games within an entire genre, some aspects of that game are going to suffer. And somehow for Breath of the Wild, despite being so incredible and dare I say flawless in so many aspects of gameplay, lore and music, its story suffers the most from the resources so purely utilized in other departments. It's not even really a story that is really strung together unless you decide to make it so. It's funny to see some skip around and rush to the conclusion of Ganon with their absolute wizardry and mastery of the gameplay, but at the same time it's also kind of sad. After this became my first Zelda game, I went on over to Twilight Princess, and that game's story is something else. It was so full of emotion, wonder, beauty, and somberness that it really impacted the way I thought about stories in games, and that was even after playing games like Red Dead Redemption 2. But Breath of the Wild's freedom in all aspects means that its story can't truly flourish like its predecessors had done so. It stumbles only because it's so open and free that the player's agency can in many ways just outrule the notions of the story to begin with. It's such an interesting setting and time in Hyrule, yet most of the story is basically told through flashbacks that you have to go and find within, again, the open world, making it kind of redundant. And the main quests itself are not that spectacular in their story aspects because it mainly amazes with its gameplay rather than a wondrous story. Even then, despite the flashbacks relaying some emotion, you never become truly attached to the characters just by playing through the main plot. Rather, it's your connection to the beautifully carved world that allows you to ascertain such a connection. If you blitz through the game only going for the main quest, you will not be amazed or even satisfied completely with the story, especially if you didn't look around for the flashbacks or the hidden pieces of lore and story littered amongst the open world that you explore. Even I never felt quite satisfied with the story. Despite watching videos, looking into theories and lore, the game just missed a spark that the previous Zeldas held. Maybe it's because of the loneliness you may feel when exploring, or the fact that the main cast are all essentially dead, and you only know them through the acquisition of your forgotten memories. But the story here doesn't really match up with the other aspects of the game, and indefinitely doesn't match with the bar set by previous entries in the franchise. It's why I truly hope that although the sequel may retain similar aspects in gameplay and further refine them, I hope that Nintendo truly focused on the story above all else to make its quality reach the aspects of the game that was so clearly hardly worked on, to make a package unmatched in every field. This last section will definitely be a quick one, and it will be touching upon the music of this game. The music of Breath of the Wild is surely one of the best of the entire franchise, and saying that for a franchise that has such defining and revolutionary video game music like Zelda truly means something incredible. Every theme here, from the combat to the moment of somberness and tension in the flashbacks, all give certain emotions that were unparalleled in so many ways. Every theme was able to match exactly what was going on screen, and not many games do it like Breath of the Wild. Wild, the theme struck upon certain emotions that the composer specifically wanted you to pick out and truly feel it within every aspect of the game. It's a soundtrack that is one of the best by Nintendo in the last decade, and even today, such music can give me goosebumps due to the wonder it ensues within, and its themes of all varying complexity and beats allows the player to truly reflect on how the game as a whole is absolutely incredible even 6 years later, as the music continues to be held in a position of bliss amongst the other games in such a great franchise. As Breath of the Wild continues to stay fantastic in most of its aspects, the sequel continuously retains traffic unlike any other video game releasing in the next few years, a feat only created by the absolute mastery of its predecessor. I hope you all did enjoy this video, and depending on the success of this video, I'll have another one but on Red Dead Redemption 2. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.